The first of 5 elections in Arizona is just weeks away. The person overseeing them, Secretary of State Adrien Fontes, joins us in the studio. Concerns about the integrity of our elections extend over every detail, including how ballots are printed. Arizona could become the latest state to guarantee access to abortions, but first, it needs to get on the ballot. Thank you for joining us on The Briefing. My name is Rafael Carranza. I'll be your host for this weekly debrief. We'll bring you top news and in-depth analysis of major issues from across Arizona, powered by the extensive reporting of the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. Please join us every Monday morning on YouTube. You can also find us on AZ Central's Instagram and TikTok. We will kick off each episode of The Briefing with the top 3 things that you need to know this week. Let's begin with the latest on the Gilbert goons. Officials in Maricopa and Pinal counties have reopened several cases and are working to link them together after a Republic investigation connected them to the fatal beating of Preston Lord around Halloween. His death was recently ruled a homicide. There are 2 lawsuits making their way through court. They accuse the Gilbert goons of assaulting unsuspecting victims, recording the attacks, and then sharing photos and videos on social media. They also accuse parents of negligent supervision. Since the Republic investigation, at least 15 adults and teens have been arrested in connection with a series of attacks in Gilbert, Mesa, and Pinal County. The fallout from the election-related conspiracies and threats against local officials continues years later. Maricopa County Supervisor Clint Hickman announced he would not seek re-election in November. He joins fellow Republican Bill Gates, who said last year he would also step down after his term ends.
We're done. We're done.
The supervisors faced false claims of election fraud in tightly contested races in 2020 and 2022. They're not the only familiar names leaving county government. Supervisors appointed Russ Skinner as the new Maricopa County Sheriff in early February. He took over for Paul Penzone, who stepped down in January after 7 years in office. Republicans are suing the Arizona Secretary of State over new election rules unveiled in December. The manual, often referred to as the Election Bible, outlines how Arizona's 15 counties should run their elections. The Republican National Committee joined a lawsuit filed by the state and Yavapai County GOP in early February. They argue the changes could lead to election fraud by weakening basic safeguards. Republican leaders in the state House and Senate also filed a second lawsuit over the new rules. One of their main concerns deals with the Secretary of State's authority, allowing it to exclude the votes from an entire county in the statewide canvass if supervisors refuse to canvass the votes and turn in the results. Arizona has played a central role in efforts to cast doubts on elections. State Republicans spent at least $5.5 million on an audit of the 2020 election that yielded 0 evidence of fraud. With the presidential election set for November 5th, there are 2 other main elections this year. March 19th is a presidential preference election. This is when voters will choose their party's nominee for president. In Arizona, all voters must be registered as a Republican or Democrat to participate. Then, on July 30th, voters will decide their party primaries for other non-presidential races. This includes a U.S. Senate seat and Arizona's 9 House districts. I'd like to welcome Adrien Fontes. He's Arizona's Secretary of State. Before that, he ran elections in Maricopa County. Mr. Fontes, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio.
Thank you.
So to start off, I want to get your reaction to the 2 lawsuits that were filed by Republicans in the state, including the NRC, which joined the lawsuit about the changes to the election procedurals manual. What do you make about the lawsuits and what they allege about the changes?
Well, I'm not going to speak to the merits of the lawsuit themselves. I think we're in very, very good shape. I will say that. But, this is to be expected. We're coming into a political year. Folks want to do some fundraising. And so what we've seen is the weaponization of our courts, politicizing some of these processes that ought not be politicized. And then people are using them to fundraise. And so it is what it is. We're gonna fight the fight. I have a lot of confidence that we're going to come out ahead on all of these lawsuits, regardless of whether it's about the EPM or any of the other things, because we've got the law on our side. I think we've got truth on our side, and we've got some of the best lawyers in the state on our side too. So I think we're going to be in good shape.
Can you briefly walk us through some of the changes outlined in the election procedures manual, and how did you come up with these changes as well?
Well, one of the most interesting areas, and I'll focus on this one, was some of the ways that the legislature really put our county recorders in a hard spot. One of the pieces of legislation they passed some time ago made it so that if they did it the way the legislature wanted, they would be violating federal law. And if they did it the way the federal law dictates, they would be violating that state law. And so what we've been struggling with, and then there was a lawsuit about that. So in the Elections Procedures Manual, we tried to kind of figure out that soup of stuff and all of the little rules that go along with it. Again, the problem that we have is many of our lawmakers don't understand these complex systems, and they're getting their information from places that aren't real. And so we, as taxpayers, end up paying for way too many lawyers, way too many lawsuits, and it just becomes a political football, and it shouldn't be, right? This stuff is generally very straightforward. Folks in Arizona have been following these rules for a very long time, and so the changes that we've seen really come out of a bunch of folks who don't know the rules very well, and I think they're a little bit misguided, but we will continue to work with them to make sure that all of our voters are taken care of.
Anything else that you think voters in Arizona should know ahead of the several elections we'll be having?
Absolutely. So in the March presidential preference election, only Democrats and Republicans are eligible. If you have not registered under one of those two parties by February 20th, you're too late. You cannot vote in that election. Whether you think that's fair or not, that's the law. The August primary has been moved to July 30th, so you have to pay close attention to the voter registration calendar and so forth in August. And we made those adjustments because of some other problems that we had that the legislature created by changing the threshold of the recount. More or less, the way that people vote is going to be basically the same as we always have done it in Arizona, except for a couple of those date changes, which I think is real important to pay attention to. Please pay attention to arizona.vote or any of your county election offices' websites.
Thank you. That's Adrien Fontes, Secretary of State in Arizona. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
A Phoenix company that makes ballots for Arizona's elections is also ramping up security efforts this year as the state faces additional scrutiny over every part of the election process. Arizona Republic reporter Sasha Hupka and photojournalist Patrick Breen toured their facilities. Let's take a look.
The ballots used in Arizona's elections are printed here, a 100,000 square foot warehouse operated by Runback Election Services in Phoenix. The building is already outfitted with top-of-the-line security features, like cameras, GPS tracking, and cybersecurity firewalls, all with one goal in mind.
Arizona ballots, as well as every other county we work with, are safe and secure coming out of this facility.
That's Jeff Ellington. He's the president and CEO for Runback. The company prints ballots for counties in about 24 states. They receive information from each county about what to print on it. Each ballot has a unique barcode. So do the envelopes for early ballots. Once they're ready to go, they're shipped by mail or trucked to each county, and then they get sent out to voters.
We built this facility. We really designed a lot of the features around cybersecurity, just to make sure we didn't have any bad actors penetrating us from the outside. And then the physical security is more important than ever now, to make sure that the ballots, what gets done here is secure and transparent to what happens, and there's integrity in the process.
But doing that work has become more challenging since claims of election fraud surfaced about 4 years ago with zero evidence. Ellington added armed officers at the time.
I've had a lot of threats. The facility's had a lot of threats. But it's what everybody in the election community right now is dealing with.
2 years ago, Runback was at the center of allegations accusing it of mishandling the chain of custody of ballots. Those claims were tossed out in court. But all of it was enough to spark threats against Ellington and his staff. It's part of a larger trend nationwide impacting election and election-related workers.
Well, it's not okay, right? I mean, there should not be a time when people are doing one of the most important jobs in this country is our right to vote and performing elections. So those threats are not okay. Does it bother me? Yeah, but you also get a little bit jaded to it, right? It's just a lot of people on social media.
This year, Runback revised its ballot custody forms to make it clear who should have them and when. The company also added cameras and is working to set up a live video feed for election observers. Ellington says the safety of the ballots and his staff are paramount. Reporting for The Briefing, I'm Sasha Hupka with photographer Patrick Breen.
Coming up in just a bit, we'll introduce you to some of the reporters bringing you extensive coverage of the 2024 elections.
The Arizona Republic. Here for it. Are you?
Welcome back to The Briefing. There is a lot of political news and activity happening this year. The Arizona Republic's politics team will be there breaking it down for you. Joining me now are three election reporters. Ron Hansen covers national politics, Mary Jo Pitzel covers state government, and Sasha Hupka covers county elections. Ron, as a newly minted battleground, what role is Arizona expected to play in 2024?
Yeah, I think Arizona will once again be one of the presidential battleground states, but the story of Arizona in 2024 is really about top to bottom, how many competitive races and how high the stakes are. We have, yes, the presidential race, which figures to be an important race all the way to November. We also have a U.S. Senate race that could be among the more competitive ones. We have a couple of congressional seats that are up for grabs, and the legislature is also sitting on sort of a knife's edge. So really, at all levels of government, you're looking at a lot of competitive races. Arizona voters will be shaping a lot of the tone and tenor of politics in America for years to come.
Thanks, Ron. And Mary Jo, a lot of the things there's a lot on the ballot this year, but what are the three major issues that voters should be on the lookout for this year?
Well, obviously, nothing's going to be bigger probably than the abortion measure. Well, after the presidential race, with all due respect, but rather to put in place protections for reproductive freedom. Secondly, I would look at the effort to turn the legislature blue. Democrats have been on this path for a while. They think this year they've got a good chance of flipping the House and maybe also the Senate to Democratic control, which would make a big difference. And number three, I would say there are going to be a bunch of measures that the lawmakers have sent to the ballot, from everything from whether to get rid of photo radar to some election reforms that Governor Hobbs would never sign. So I would predict there's going to be some voter fatigue with the very long ballot.
A very, very long ballot. Sasha, elections are obviously run at the county level. We have seen a large amount of turnover, particularly among people who have been doing this for years. What impact could that turnover have in the way that elections are administered this year?
Well, to be honest with you, it depends. I think there's some counties like Maricopa, the state's largest, where you see people who are relatively new, like Recorder Stephen Richer, because he was just elected in 2020. But he's been through a few election cycles at this point, and so they have some amount of experienced leadership. Then you have other counties like Pinal County, where they had widespread election problems last time around. I mean, that didn't impact anybody's votes, but there were issues. And Recorder Dana Lewis there, who's kind of running the elections operations for them this year, she's brand new, so she's going to have a little bit of an uphill battle. But it's important to note that the election space in Arizona is very small. So all of these people talk to each other, and the Secretary of State's office, I'm sure, is giving them some support behind the scenes as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Ron and Mary Jo also host The Gaggle. It is a politics podcast that you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. Sasha is the author of the Recount a New Elections newsletter. Sign up on azcentral.com. Another major issue this election will be abortion access. Arizona could become the latest state to codify the right to abortion in its constitution. The Arizona for Abortion Access Coalition is collecting signatures to get an initiative on the November ballot. If approved, the measure would guarantee the right to abortion up until viability, or about 23 or 24 weeks. Supporters must gather at least 383,000 valid signatures by July to qualify for the ballot. They've collected about 250,000 to date. The measure has drawn opposition from a campaign called It Goes Too Far, which argues that the language is too vague. For more information about the 2024 elections, including federal, state, and local races, visit azcentral.com. As the largest media organization in Arizona, you can trust AZ Central and the Arizona Republic to provide breaking news and in-depth analysis of election issues. We want to be your oasis of clarity through all the noise.
Arizona Republic and azcentral.com journalists have been covering Arizona politics since 1890. Our reporting puts your politicians and lawmakers under the magnifying glass. We ask the questions that matter most to you. On our podcast, The Gaggle, you get the stories behind the headlines from political newsmakers and from the reporters who cover this news every day.
Before we finish this week, at the end of each episode of The Briefing, we'll leave you with a piece of bright news in what we're calling the Sunspot. Eager baseball fans, myself included, can breathe easier now. The Cactus League has officially returned. 15 of the 30 MLB teams are in the Valley for spring training. Games will go on through March 26th. The home team and National League champs, the Arizona Diamondbacks, are fresh off an unlikely playoff run, falling short in the World Series last year against the Texas Rangers. The starting lineup from the World Series team will be back this season, including National League Rookie of the Year Corbin Carroll, and Golden Globe Award-winning catcher Gabriel Moreno and first baseman Christian Walker. The D-backs kick off the regular season on March 28th against the Colorado Rockies at Chase Field. Thank you for tuning in to The Briefing, your weekly debrief of top news by the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. We hope you join us again next time. Have a great week.